It's like a playlist that works device independently. We are serving around about 5.6 million video views a day with about 2.3 million hours. And we are happy to hear because you can look at the ZDF Mediathek as a service composed of recommendations, those made by editors, those automated, and also more and more like personalized recommendations. On the start page, we can see here some front stage teaser that is created by the editors, but below you can see here the first a personalized cluster for every user that is based on the user history. We use a lot of different algorithms like sequence-based recommendations, also collaborative filtering and hybrid variants of that. Second is my program that is only for registered users. That is more like directly steered by the users. It contains the bookmarks, the playlists, and so on and so on. And there are many other content clusters made by algorithms, like, for example, a trending cluster or some last chance clusters for content that is not available for much longer. So this is the world we are living in when we talk about recommender system at PSMs. It's a really big party with a lot of stakeholders involved and different goals, different language, and different interests. The most important here are the editors who set the guidelines, set the focus, where do we want to have automation, where we want to have recommendations on our website. They set the rules, and also they bring on a lot of experience when it comes to serving content and about the content itself, of course. We have the developers and operations who do all the algorithms and data processing. You saw a lot of them on the first slide here. Of course, the audience who have really high expectations when it comes to recommendations, thanks to Netflix and all the other good services out there. And especially for public service media, it's important that we have a public remit that we have to fulfill and a really restrictive legal framework we operate in. And we're accompanied by a lot of different board and regulators who are looking after how do we fulfill this public remit. New to the show are the content partners. ZDF was serving a lot of content that was made by ZDF and partner programs, but that is growing much, much bigger right now. We announced in May that we will join content with the ARD, the second big public broadcast in Germany. So you can get any content by search or by recommendations on both platforms. That is really, really cool for users, and then they asked for a long time for this to happen. Back in 2016, roundabout, we had a lot of discussion inside ZDF. How can we start this personalization thing going on? And we were talking about these metrics on the machine learning side. We were talking about MMR and NECG and any kind of metrics you're completely aware of, I guess. But also, how do they relate to public service media values and business KPIs? A really interesting question. And how do we bring this to our board to let go this thing? Finally, we settled on some really simple rules. We didn't solve that problem of explaining what kind of diversity, what kind of serendipity we want to bring into the algorithms, because we don't want to build up a cathedral where we know in front, where we have to know in front where every stone is sitting right now at the end. So simply, we have to be user-centric, of course. The content recommendations have always be relevant and available, measurable. Of course, we have some KPIs that's mainly watch time, outreach by our public remit, of course. We have to be diverse and use as much of our content catalog as possible. That's coverage. The third one is really a bit more restrictive. We have to be free and transparent. That's, of course, a public value as itself. But concretely, we said, OK, we will have no mandatory login on ZDF Mediathek, and there are no hidden barriers. And of course, you can disable all the recommendations and all the personalization stuff on the website. So with a go from the boards, we built up the system. And from the start, we built up a big A/B testing system so that we could measure all these metrics from the beginning, also different algorithms, and could look at how these hypotheses we discussed with the editors earlier would work out or not. And we really got some really encouraging results, I would say. We saw that with the personalized recommendations, we got orders of magnitude more distinct content watched. That's really, really great. So there's no filter bubble on an aggregate level. The opposite happened. We had especially more niche content watched. There's special interest content. We don't have so much of that, but that was also really encouraging. And for us, it worked out well to use some kind of simple, mechanistic diversity, bringing some randomness into the recommendations worked out really well. It improved the diversity by this metric, but didn't hurt the business KPIs, for example, and also was really helpful to have different post-processing, forcing different programs, and so on and so on. So also this worked out very well. And the first goal was to be user-centric, and it was the most important part for us. How do the user use these recommendations? And you can see here on this upper graph that round about up to 50% of the viewing volume on HBB TV or smart TV comes from this personalized cluster, from the single one every day. That was really great, but of course we didn't solve that question about how do metrics and business KPIs relate in a more complex way. So this is already and still for us an open question. Are metrics a good proxy for business KPIs? We simply don't know exactly. Here you can see the front page of ZDF Info. ZDF Info is a documentary channel, a free open-to-air documentary channel. Back in 2019, we started a project with the editors and say, okay, what can we do with automation and personalization on this website? The people at ZDF Info are really data guys, so to say. They really love to look into dashboards and code. We were talking about some YAML configuration files of this recommender service. We also delved into this Python code that generated the trending items on this content cluster. It was really nice, but it was really hard. And of course, that is not scalable. We cannot use the same way with every other editors because we cannot expect them to be so tech-related. And so we invented some tools to help in this discussion. For example, some interactive test bed where the editors by themselves can use different algorithms, different post-processing steps. They can see directly on production data what happens with it. And so we brought them, the editors, a much more active position, working on more closely on the outcome of the algorithms. And more than that, we created a lot of different Python notebooks where we looked into the data preparation pre-processing, for example. So you know that the algorithm itself mostly is a really short piece of code, but it's really important what data do you put into, what bias is there. And we were looking at the APIs and sometimes changed the APIs to be better understandable for the editors in their language. Yes, and of course, the final goal, which we have reached so far, is we want to minimize the semantic gaps between the different worlds of models, business KPIs, and public service values. And of course, we want to enable the editors to become more like algorithm curators and not pushing around teaser image on the website, but more directly to give them a cool, a nice tool, a powerful tool to go for automation. Okay, the next challenge we faced is, every day we face it at around 8 o'clock in premium time. A lot of traffic is coming through the website. The hyperscalers serving the recommendations scale very well, so there are hundreds of instances spinning up, and a lot of energy is used. And when we train our models, especially the sequential models, it's really, really computational intensive. So we looked into ways, how can we reduce the power consumptions? And here's some ideas we looked into, of course, on the algorithm and model training side. Can we use shallow models? A really interesting topic since 2019, a lot of discussion, especially here on RecSys. Can we use less data? Can we do some incremental retraining and not train the full model every time and again? Do we really have to hyper-personalized? Do we really have to have models that are capable of serving every single user's a very specific recommendation? And on the inference side also, the question where we can use caching while staying fresh, what computation can we do in which manner, and on this side also, can we use and rely on user segments and not individual users? And to make this more tangible and more concrete. Some use case here, next video, really simple. Some user has watched the video, then they come a next video recommendation up. And we started with a really heavy, nice, and cool deep learning network to serve this recommendation. I think it was based on SUSREC. But that was really hard to train, and also we had some cold start problems because the model took too long to train. And we came up with a much simple solution that is sketched out here. So most of the high volume content is serial content. So we just work out this way. We look at, is this content really serial content? Then we look into, is there next episode available? We just look into the metadata of this content. And if it's that way, then we just show this as a next video. And that's by 70% the way to go here. So we have for this shallow model, it's really data efficient. We have increment rating, so everything is fine. And we have just a single user segment because every user gets the same. And we changed that and A/B tested that, and we saw nearly no degradation in business KPIs. Of course, you have to have a fallback model here. We brought this in place, but it's not so computationally heavy. To summarize and talk about next steps, talking about PSM recommendations is really hard because there's no established common grammar for them. The underlying metrics and value relations are not so well understood, we think. Our way was to start small and pragmatic and spin up the communication wheel between every stakeholder involved, and also developing tools for that. That's really important. And we are committed to environmental goals, period. Of course, a lot of more have to be done here. We want to work further within automation. It's really important. We have to do this in much more natural language and not from the tech side. We need some more thorough investigation of these relations because we're really interested into. And it's always our aim to find the simplest, most data and energy efficient algorithm for every single use case. And we think it's mostly something different we have to do about that. And of course, on a more strategic level, we have to connect more recommendations to marketing and content acquisitions because it's really interesting that you know, okay, we have some niche content, but we could serve much more to much more people so that could inform decision-making processes within content acquisition. And I would like to say thank you for your time, and I'm open for questions.
Thank you. Let's thank our speaker. As always, you can ask questions on site by going to the microphone or use Slido for the, I call it offline, but it's actually online version. Nava?
Thank you for the very nice talk, Nava, Maastricht University. I've known Germany to take the lead in terms of public media, in terms of viewpoint representation, so it's nice to see that German media is also continuing to take the lead also in other aspects. How much in your work do you think about having a conversation with your users in terms of the goals that they're setting? If we're saying that this is a healthy information diet, do you actually try to establish what their ambitions, goals, aspirations are in that regard?
Yeah, so currently we do this on a very low level. So every year we ask users in a survey, what do you expect from recommendations? Would you like to see some explanations? What are your intents going to the recommendations? I think that's really useful, and we got some really valuable feedback. We also were thinking about, should we place some more explanations directly to the recommendations and get some feedback by this way, for example? So yes, I think it's really important, and I think we are on a low level when it comes to that, of course, but that has to improve. Yeah, sure.
Thank you. I take one question from online. In the UI, where editors could apply different recommender settings and could see the result recommendations directly, did you notice any editor preference for one particular setting? If so, do you know why?
Oh, okay. So some preference, no, I would say no. It's really a really tangible point here because the editors themselves, of course, have some expectations, and they are highly subjective sometimes. So we've seen some algorithms like Grün, it's really old, I would say, that generate really recommendations that editors really like because some interesting happenings sometimes. But when you see that the base models are heavily, the outcome of the base models are heavily post-processed. There are some business rules, some marketing rules. You can put in some promotions, especially within these clusters. There's no direct connection to the base model itself. So it's more like the API is much more important, and the post-processing, I would say, is also really much important. And there we have some good ideas, especially coming from the editors to us, where we not have thought about before. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. We have another question on site, and I will take this as the last question on this one. Please continue on Slido.
Thank you. Bob van der Velde, Dutch Public Broadcasting. So we're in a very similar situation, and we're looking at especially this collaboration with editorial. And my question is slightly different than the last one. I was wondering how you can provide insights to editorial when it comes to personalized recommendations, because they're very hard to explain in aggregate, and you have a very easy time showing a set of content that editors might think is the set of content that everyone will see, but probably there are some at least ideal types of users that you could differentiate there. And I was wondering, so how do you relay that kind of information to editorial?
Yeah, so within this interactive test bed, we have also some library of personas, so some different usage patterns we have built into it. It's more like a manual process, so we are not directly gathering statistics and say, okay, this is some real typical sequence of usage. So we have some handmade, but these are the most important use cases for the editors. So we have also the possibility to say, okay, algorithm A with an hyperparameter set, and then persona A, B, C, D, and combine that. So yeah, that's possible within the system. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Let's thank Andreas Grün again. Please continue our conversation online. So there's several more questions on that, but we have to move on.